everyone, welcome back to the Critic-Verse. This is going to be the start of the breakdown and reviews for Superman and Lois Season 3, beginning with Episode 1, of course, titled Closer. Now, before we get to the breakdown, like, comment, and subscribe to be a part of the Critic-Verse. Now, on to the breakdown. The first scene picks up with a montage and narration by Lois of the 27-day time jump from the end of Season 2. It starts with the Kent family inside their new fortress. Clark introduces Laura to Lois, Jordan, and the new Jonathan, played by Michael Bishop. Lana has revealed plans to build a new town hall for Smallville, probably so they can stop holding meetings in this high school gymnasium. Kyle has both his daughters help him pick out paint for his divorced guy apartment, and the Irons family are putting personal touches on their new home, and General Lane finally shuts down the Smallville mines. We then cut to a scene of Clark and Lois, who give us an example of the episode title, as they use Tauro, aka Morgan Edge's vacation villa, to have adult time away from the boys. But Clark worries about not being able to see his brother since he went to the New Earth at the end of Season 2, after they finally got closer to one another. But then, Clark hears the ELT. It's the boys who want to practice some more. And then Lois reveals that she's investigating Bruno Mannheim, head of Intergang, which worries Clark because this isn't the first time they've done so and haven't gotten anything to stick. But the boys trigger the ELT once more, and Lois still wants to demonstrate that episode title once more. Cue the title card. After the title card, Clark and Jordan are practicing Jordan's flying by having a race back to the fortress. And after Jordan gets too cocky, he becomes a skipping stone on the water. And Clark beats him back to the fortress. While waiting for Jordan, Clark is setting up a training simulation with villains such as Mechano Man, Titano, and settles on the Atomic Skull, which is a Superman villain that debuted in Superman number 323 in May 1978. Lois is teaching Jonathan to drive, and something interesting to note is he puts his hands at 9 and 3, and Lois immediately says 10 and 2, even though the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration recommends 9 and 3 is best for drivers. And even though Lois Lane is an ace reporter, she's a bad teacher, at least when it comes to driving. But most parents are, something about not wanting their kid to leave the nest so soon. But when it comes to giving constant criticism, Jonathan continually messes up after that. And then she suggests trying again tomorrow in her car, believing the car is the problem. General Lane goes to meet John Henry and Nat at their home because Nat doesn't have government clearance to go to the base, but specifically because John Henry wants her to be a normal teenager. Sam, after remembering how genetics works, suggests he and Nat spend some time together, and she happily agrees. Kyle and Sarah are hanging posters in the town square for a blood drive when Kyle sees Lana and asks her about the divorce papers she has yet to sign. And he has false hope until she reveals she's just been too busy to, and leaves Kyle for an emergency at the high school. Unbeknownst to both of them, Chrissy has been watching all of that go down from the window of the Gazette with a look of longing on her face. Behind her, Clark is putting the finishing touches on an article, and Chrissy wants him to see what's going on at the high school. But he hears an accident about to take place in Malaysia and takes off to stop it, leaving Chrissy visually frustrated at her new employee. Clark shows up to save the day, only to see a crane about to fall, but Jordan is also there trying to do the superheroics on his own, and he ends up doing more harm than good. And Clark has to end up fixing the problem while putting so much on his plate. And he looks up pretty pissed at Jordan. And in the next scene, we see them both at the new fortress, and Clark is lecturing Jordan about disobeying him, reckless endangerment, and almost exposing himself. But Jordan still thinks he had it under control. Clark, even though he's a frustrated father, just sends Jordan home, and Jordan flies home. At the high school, Lana is being told by her assistant that there apparently is mold in the walls of the school from years of water damage. Then Clark shows up and he confirms it with his x-ray vision that pretty much all the walls in the school have mold beneath them. Lana talks about not having a fix for that in the budget. But then she changes the subject to Clark and Lois's relationship, and as Clark says things are good between them, Lana infers what that really means, to which he tells Clark that it's okay and that she won't mention anything to Lois when they have drinks later. In the next scene, Lois infiltrates the doctor's office of her Earth's version of John Henry's sister, who reveals to Lois that the John Henry of this Earth was no saint but a deeply flawed man, and ends up telling Lois to leave her alone, but not before revealing that Lois might be pregnant from the symptoms that she describes. She also goes into detail about what type of man John Henry was, that even though their father trained them to serve in the army, that he betrayed his country and sold weapons to Bruno Mannheim, the leader of Intergang, who Lois is investigating, but also Lex Luthor, who is supposed to make an appearance later in the season. Jordan and Sarah are hanging out. Apparently Jordan didn't go straight home, but he's recounting his exploits and still getting her gifts, possibly in an attempt at winning her back, and she declines, stating that she just wants to be friends, something which has seemed to be hard for Jordan to accept. I mean, after last season, I didn't expect him to. The grandpa-granddaughter movie night doesn't go the way Natalie wanted it to, because it turns into a recruitment drive from Sam for her to join the DoD Academy instead of being at Smallville High. And her sad face totally goes unnoticed, completely over Sam's head. But in the next scene, Clark gets home and relays the Malaysia incident he had with Jordan to Lois, but Lois seems to have bigger concerns on her mind, considering the information that she just got from John Henry's sister earlier. She then reveals the information to Clark, and he takes the information as well as could be expected of anyone, even Superman himself. But as Clark Kent, he assures Lois that they're in this together and they're a united front for whatever comes next. In the next scene, John Henry is welding while his AI tells him the gift he got for the boy's 16th birthday is going to be late. He tells it to cancel the order and says he'll get it himself. Natalie gets home and is visually and verbally upset at Sam's recruitment pitch, and that this Sam isn't the same as the one she knew, which does piss John Henry off. In the next scene, Jordan lands at the front door and has a heart-to-heart with Jonathan about the gripe he has with their dad being Superman and saying that he can't do his job as Superboy just yet. And also how Jonathan is worried about not being able to get his license because he doesn't have any powers. He sees this as the only chance of any freedom. And they both have a sort of connection about whether or not their parents are giving them the right advice, and they both agree that both of their parents has more experience in what they're both trying to learn, and that they should listen to them for the time being. Clark and John Henry have an awkward run-in at the convenience store, where Clark is seen buying a pregnancy test. And then John Henry gives Clark advice, because technically, he was married to the same woman when you think about it. But next you see Lana and Lois are out for drinks, and Lana is complaining about the state the Smallville town finances are in, and Lois is hyping her up, but Lana notices Lois isn't drinking and guesses why that is. And they both reminisce on the good parts of a new baby, and it gets Lois even more excited for having a child. In the next scene at the Smallville DMV, Lois is getting John ready, and it turns out his instructor is none other than Coach Gaines, Jonathan's former football coach who had to get another job because of Jonathan's XK debacle from last season. Back at the farm, Jonathan shows up with Lois looking really bummed out, hinting he failed because Coach Gaines deducted points because of his attitude. But it was just to psych Clark out and he actually passed. And we get the first positive interaction with Clark and John after all the angst that was last season. Lois and Clark are both so proud, and this transfers to the thought of having another child even more for Lois. We then transition to later in the day as the boys' party starts. Clark sees Sarah arrive and he mentions it to Jordan, and Jordan disappears. Then John Henry sprints past Clark as Clark greets him, only to go yell at Sam for trying to recruit his daughter. He says to Sam that Nat comes from a world at war and she deserves to be a regular teenager, and Sam finally sees his error. Just then, John passes by with his friends and Candace, and they run into Chrissy, as she cringes at being called Miss Beppo, but then becomes really cringy at trying to act young. She even got John and Jordan alarm clocks, even though most people his age just use their phones, and she's embarrassed at herself. Kyle is then seen critiquing Clark's ribs because they apparently aren't quite up to par. Even says if Clark has to ask if you put enough sauce, he probably didn't put enough sauce. And he uses this as an excuse to leave to go inside the house because he sees Lana and John Henry laughing. Kind of seems like they're flirting with each other. Inside, he runs into Chrissy hiding out after feeling old and uncool in front of Jonathan and his friends, and she and Kyle have a pity party of two. And after a quick couple shots of the party, even one of Coach Gaines spitting out Clark's ribs, we go to the barn for Clark and Lois are putting on a slideshow of the boys, but Clark hears danger and has to leave the party early. Clark arrives on the streets of Metropolis only to see the Atom Man, Henry Miller, wreaking havoc on the streets, causing chaos. But he has powers now, making the fight a whole lot more difficult. Clark moves the fight as to not cause more casualties with the citizens, but still seems to be causing massive property damage. But as long as no one else gets hurt. Back at the party, Jordan is listening to the fight his father is having with the Atom Man, but then Sarah interrupts with a cupcake and a question, which starts an awkward conversation about whether or not Jordan is avoiding her. Jordan can still hear the fight, but decides to take John's advice and stay out of it because he's not ready yet. And after his talk with Sarah, it seems like things are on the mend between them, even though they can't be together like he wants. Back in Metropolis, Superman wants to help Atom Man, who denies his help, but gets riddled with bullets. But when Clark looks around, he can't find a shooter, nor can he find the bullets. He turns around once more to find a stranger in a weird mask, but then starts to hear all these disasters happening around him at once. He flies up to see if he can find them, but he can't. When he gets back, both Henry and the masked person are gone. He notices a billboard in the background marked Suicide Slums, an infamous place in Superman lore. In the next scene, the former mayor shows up at the birthday party and threatens Lana for her recent financial moves she made with some secret accounts. Apparently, the money might be dirty. Sam comes up to Natalie and offers a peace offering in the form of a cake. He then apologizes for not understanding her feelings in the moment and says he wants to try to get to know Natalie, which she happily agrees to. John and Jordan get matching Hawaiian shirts from Sam, and after sounding ungrateful, Lois starts to tell the boys about the story of the day she gave birth to them as a joke. They then leave the room, and Clark and Lois have a one-on-one. Clark tells Lois he is ready to have another baby. and he flies them to Tao's vacation house. In the next scene, Chrissy wakes up with Kyle, which was expected, and says it was a one-time thing, which he agrees, because Kyle's situation would make it very messy. Just then, Lana shows up with the signed divorce papers, and you could really feel like this is hitting both of them because they both start to tear up at the fact that their marriage is officially over. But it couldn't be more awkward as Kyle closes the door and remembers that Chrissy is still in his apartment. It's just not his month. At the Gazette, Lois and Clark are discussing that Henry Miller, aka Adam Man, was released from prison early because he was dying with a brain tumor and had been released 3 months ago. Just then, Chrissy comes in frazzled after her one-night stand, and Lois then gets a call, and unfortunately the rug is pulled out from under them as it's revealed that she's not pregnant, but that these symptoms are still concerning to the doctor, so that they need to schedule follow-up appointments. In an underground lab, the Adam Man's body is being experimented on, and it turns out Bruno Mannheim is there calling the shots to the doctor, and that the masked individual seems to be his enforcer. Now, the Adam Man was dead, but then Bruno gave the doctor the orders to increase his dosage, to which the doctor doesn't believe it would help, but Bruno repeats the order to the doctor, and the doctor does it, and the Adam Man's heart starts to beat once more. Bruno Mannheim is pleased, saying that they're close to what they want. End of episode. Wow, this was a great opening episode. It wasn't super flashy, but still a good way to reintroduce us to the world of Superman and Lois, especially after the disconnection from the Arrowverse. The episode is titled Closer, which is referencing the fact that the characters are getting closer to people that they haven't before, and that we're also reinforcing old connections that we might have missed out on from last season or from the season beforehand. Now, here are a couple of things I want to talk about. This is Michael Bishop, aka the new Jonathan's first episode, taking over the role from Jordan Elsas. I thought he did really well with what he was given, especially how driving was his only chance at freedom. I really felt for the guy. We get an Easter egg from the fight simulator Clark is preparing for Jordan as he scrolls through a list of villains to pick from. We first see Mechano Man, a villain that only appeared in a single issue of All-Star Superman. Then we get Titano, also known as Titano the Super Ape, that debuted in Superman number 127 in February 1959. Then, last, he settles on the Atomic Skull, a villain who debuted in Superman number 323 in May 1978. The Adam Man that appeared in this episode first appeared in Season 1, Episode 11, in a dream sequence Superman was having, where he first saved Lois. We then get introduced to a new villain on the show, which is a version of the comic book character Onomatopoeia, who in the comics was a Green Arrow villain, a hand-to-hand expert, and an expert marksman, now seems to apparently be a meta who can create sounds, and whose sounds can take on physical attacks, because she probably made the bullets that killed Adam Man. But she also made the sounds that distracted Superman enough, which gave them time to escape with the body. This episode seemed to reinforce new relationships forming, whether it was Kyle and Chrissy, or John, Henry, and Lana, or not even romantic relationships, but familial ones such as Nat and Sam Lane. One thing I was annoyed at was with the relationship drama with Jordan and Sarah seems to continue, but they also seem to have shut it down in this first episode, because I can't imagine them doing another season of that. Okay, anyway, that's all I've got for this week's video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more breakdown and reviews of this season of Superman and Lois. Thanks for joining me in the Critic-Verse. See you next time.